Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with JUNO-nominated Toronto-based jazz bassist, composer, and arranger Michael Herring. He talked about his new 2022 CD, New Dreams, Old Stories, with the avant-folk jazz quartet known as Way North. The band is always trying to connect the past and present of our collective human experience in a very unique way. They draw on the music lineages of jazz and bebop, along with folk musics from South America and the American South. It's a great sound, great story. Enjoy.
Thanks for taking a minute out for the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on the show.
So, New Dreams, Old Stories from Way North. I want to know, as the world, there's so many things that are going on, that's been going on. How relieving is it to have new material out with hopefully the prospects of putting something together live to promote this?
It's really nice to have it out. It was recorded after our last tour in 2019, and we've been kind of sitting on it as everything got canceled, over the last couple of years. And so there's sort of we just couldn't really get the impetus together to get it out. And so it does feel amazing to get it out there and have the prospect of playing together again. The band lives in 3 different cities, Toronto and Ottawa in Canada, and our drummer Richie just moved from New York City to Northampton, Massachusetts. So it's hard to get together and play and requires a lot of traveling, and I'm really excited for that chance to come.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, with this album, what are you hoping the listener gets from this experience?
Way North's really a band about positivity and community and bringing people together through music, and I think we just keep heading more and more in that direction with each of our albums, and I think this one does it the most. There's there's actual singing, like we sing the words, "Come on over to our house," and we've got Dr. Good, where we're, it's singing about dancing and being together, and, it's maybe heading in a slightly more literal direction of really trying to bring positivity into the world from music. And I hope people also hear the amount of fun that we have as playing together as friends too.
And I guess that's the idea with the positivity that you're talking about. We've all had extra time to be with ourselves and to kind of do some introspection, reflection based on what we've lived through COVID over the last couple of years. And I'm curious, with the new album coming out, what did you learn about yourself over this time that maybe you didn't necessarily realize before that will make you a stronger, not only a musician, but a person as we reemerge and start doing some things that we were used to before this?
Our trumpet player, Rebecca, is my wife, and we conceived our first child right before the pandemic started. So the pandemic has really been about becoming a parent for me. That, the first chunk of the pandemic, Rebecca was pregnant, and then we had our baby Nancy, who's about 1.5 years old now. So for me, it's really tied to that, the lessons of learning of being a parent and learning to let go and get to experience that kind of love and sharing. And in some ways, I've been saying that having a baby is like being on the worst tour possible. You have to get up really early and be somewhere, and it's like going to the airport or something all the time. So I don't know if having a baby prepares me to be a better traveling musician, or being a traveling musician prepared me to have a baby, but it seems there's some similarity there, I think.
That's interesting, because I remember interviewing your wife, and I can't remember if we got the interview in before she gave birth, because she was nervous that, I don't know if you remember that, but I remember the publicist had said, so I think we got it in before. I think it was kind of a false alarm that week, and we had talked before. Right, that would make sense. The record came out just before Nancy was born, within days. So, yeah. Okay, cool. So, and it's interesting you talk about, being prepared and kind of the vice versa role, because I'm thinking as a parent myself, I mean, and I'm not a musician, but I've been used to travel, and I don't know how that would work, how the yin and yang come together on that. It's interesting. Talk to me a little bit about how the band came together and what kind, I know you've talked about putting positivity out there. You're from different regions, but ultimately kind of talk to me about the big bang beginnings of this and how you have evolved over the years to where you're at right now. Well, Rebecca and I both got grants through the Ontario government to go down to New York City right after we got married in 2013. And it kind of was a strange, long, artistic honeymoon, and we were there for about 6 months. Richie is a friend of friends, and it's kind of funny that we had never met him because he's really close with a lot of my friends, and I'd spent quite a bit of time down there before. So it's kind of funny that we never
had met, but he's close with a lot of close friends of mine. And then Peter, I knew from doing a little bit of playing with him in Canada, even though he was living in New York at the time, but I'd done a few gigs with him and had met him a few times over the years. So when we were down there, we were trying to play with each of them, like sort of we met Richie through some friends and really was excited to try to make some music with him, and I was trying to connect with Peter, and then it turned out they were best friends. So we ended up playing all four of us together, and it was just one of those things where we played it and it was magical right away. Like we all loved the same music, like we love the same aspects of folk music and of New Orleans music and bringing that into jazz. And we're also all interested in kind of a similar aspect of the avant-garde, a kind of, I don't know what you call it, like kind of an Ornette Coleman-y, like kind of more inside avant-garde, like more like free jazz opposed to like improvised music or something. I don't never know the right words for this stuff, but we're all interested in that and bringing those things together and rhythmic improvising. And so we had, I don't remember how many times we jammed. We played a few times and it was just like, this is great. And so we decided to make a demo. Both Richie and Peter were incredibly busy, and Rebecca and I had tons of time because we had these grants. We were just sort of hanging out. We managed to find 6 hours that all 4 of us could be in one place at one time. So we made a demo, and it ended up being, I can't remember how many songs is on it. It was 7 or so songs on Kings County. Our first album, we just released that demo session because it went so well. It was just like, that was great. There's no point. This isn't the rehearsal. So we just made this amazing first thing, and it was so fun, and we released it. And I think deciding to do that just kind of launched us into being a band. We got back together to do a release show. We did a little bit of touring, and then we recorded Fearless and Kind, our second album. And then when that came out, we did a lot of touring. And this album, New Dreams, Old Stories, comes on the heels of that long touring at the end of the Fearless and Kind release.
What about you? How did the jaws of jazz and improvised music kind of get into you? Maybe some early influences and how it kind of made you want to become a musician.
Well, I grew up in Victoria, British Columbia, and out in the West there, the ukulele was a big part of young, like elementary school music education. And there's a curriculum in Canada by this guy from the East Coast named Chalmers Doane that involved teaching ukulele in a really nice way to kids, like in a way that's sort of functional music, like teaching you how to play ukulele and sing in a way that you could actually have music that you use it in your life. I think I'm kind of a real big supporter of teaching kids music in a way that is not like so formal that you can't ever use it or it's not fun, Like a part of that curriculum was having bass and drums in the group, and I think I got typecast as a tall person to play the bass. So I got asked to play bass. I was into it. My parents were really supportive, and they got me bass lessons. And one teacher found a double bass for $500 that someone was selling, and they just told my parents, like, you're never going to find a $500 double bass. You should just buy it. And everyone always needs a bass player, and no kids ever have their own bass. So I got to play with a lot of people that were older and better than me from young, and no teacher wants to teach you ukulele music forever. So teachers started teaching me jazz. Ultimately, I went to a couple summer jazz camps and really got just kind of pushed and excited, and I switched to an arts high school, and then I went to the University of Toronto's jazz program after that, and I've been in Toronto ever since.
Talk to me a little bit about the very first live jazz show you went to. What was that about, and was that something that really made you want to become a musician?
Yes. I actually, through the same ukulele group, they took a bunch of us to the high school I ended up going to, had a band by this trombone player named Hugh Fraser, trombone player, piano player, who is kind of a moderately famous Canadian jazz musician. He plays trombone on Kenny Wheeler's Music for Large on Small Ensembles and did a lot of stuff in Canada from the West Coast. I don't think he's internationally famous that much, but anyway, we went and saw his band, and it was just, I don't know why I liked it. Like, I just did. And I don't know why I like jazz other than it's always grabbed me. And then everyone broke off into, like, instruments for workshops after, and I asked the bass player all these questions, and he was super supportive and super kind and took all this time, and I was probably 12 or 13, 12 I would go with, and he just, he gave me extra time, and it made me excited. And he was actually, I think that's probably why I went to jazz camp, is he was teaching at this jazz camp one of the summers after that, and I went, because he was teaching, and yeah, it just kept, it inspired me. And my parents owned the Smithsonian collection of classic jazz on cassette. So they didn't have much jazz around, but they had that. And then I'm probably one of the only kids that liked the end. Like there's the excerpt from Ornette's Free Jazz, and Lonely Woman's on there, and a bit of Mingus. And for some reason, that's what excited me. And I've been heading down that road for a very long time, I guess.
What is it about being a professional musician that you like the best? I mean, every day you wake up, you have the chance to create music. What is it that you like the best about it?
It doesn't really feel like a choice. I've just sort of always done it. I love living a creative life. I love one of my friends' e-signature is I love making friends playing music, and I'll steal that from him. I love making friends playing music. I've been really lucky through music to meet all kinds of amazing people, go to all kinds of amazing places, and I just think music opens a lot of doors in the world. I traveled a lot touring with these musicians from Mali, from West Africa, and it was like life-changing experience, like just to be in this world of with one of them, especially my friends had met in Mali, and he lived in basically abject poverty, and both him and his wife died young, basically because of poverty, even though we tried to support them. And I have a quartet album called A Very Large Gap I put out under my own name a few years ago, and that album was kind of grappling with that gap between Canada and Mali, or, you know, between the developed world and the developing world, and how hard it was to bridge that gap and communicate. And like when we play music, it was amazing, but in between, it was very complicated. You know, I would never have done that if it wasn't for music. Or, you know, I've traveled. Well, Richie, actually, from way north, we went as a trio because Peter couldn't go, but way north got to go down to this crazy jungle preserve in the Panamanian jungle because Richie's connection to Daniela Perez, and we went down to the Panama Jazz Festival, and through that he knew these people at this NGO in the jungle, and we drove 45 minutes in 4x4s into the jungle, and we're in this jungle preserve kind of entertaining guests of this sort of fundraiser week, and we had to go on these crazy hikes, and there's just places in the world that I wouldn't ever choose to go and would never have access to also that music's taken to me that I love, and the people you meet in those places that, because you're working and often they're working, you're in a more real kind of exchange when you're in dialogue with them. So I like that a lot.
Ultimately, why do you love jazz?
I think I just like self-expression. Jazz gives you a lot of room for that. I play other music too. I just like playing music that has an improvised kind of aspect to it where I feel like I can express myself and be myself. You know, jazz has a lot of room for that, and that's what I like in music. Way North really has that because it has a mixture of folk music and jazz music, and you know, a mixture of singing and instrumental, and it's got music that's avant-garde in it, but it's got music that's kind of traditional, and people seem to be able to engage with it without finding it challenging, but we're able to play really hard music or express ourselves how we want to at the same time. So that's what's rewarding for me, I think.
So as we kind of get back to live music and it opens up more, what do you hope we all realize about the power of live music that we've been away from for so long now?
I mean, I hope people realize, remember, reconnect with that feeling of connecting between live music and an audience, like from in both directions, you know, like nothing like trying to play on Facebook Live to realize how much you miss the audience, you know, like sort of staring down the camera, even though you know people are there live and they might be typing applause, applause, applause. It just doesn't feel the same as sharing it with people in a room, and for the audience to be an audience member and sit there and have that come to you is all, you know, the other half of it. And it's a symbiotic relationship, and I hope both performers and audience members feel that feeling, and it gives us a chance to connect to something, you know, especially when we're talking about jazz, like what's the point of jazz or instrumental music, you know, hopefully it's bringing out some kind of feelings in you that are you know, nonverbal or beyond the scope of literal, you know, and same with music with words. I think, you know, metaphors and all, poetry and all that have the ability to speak to something in you that is in the listener's experience and not necessarily in the direct experience of the person making the music.
So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. You have a perception of yourself. Who do you think you are?
I'm going to go sideways on that one, but I teach Tai Chi and meditation, and my teacher is into this book from Ramana Maharshi, I think that's his name, who wrote a whole book called Who Am I? You know, I think that's the endeavor of living as a human being, is figuring that out. And for me, in this context, the goal is to express myself as well as I can through playing the bass and through the music I write, and I hope that comes to you. You know, there's a song on this album called If Charlie Hayden Couldn't Write a Song to Bring World Peace, What Hope Is There for Me? I wrote that song just thinking like, I wish you could write an instrumental jazz song that would bring world peace. And then I thought like, well, Charlie Hayden spent a lot of his career trying to do that, and he didn't bring world peace. And then I was just thinking like, ugh. But when I introduce it live, I usually say, but we have to try. I think for me, that's who I would like to be, is someone out there who is trying to express myself and trying to make myself the best person I can be, and hopefully in that endeavor can share a bit of that and help other people head down that same path themselves.
Beautiful. I love that answer. Michael, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having your interest in the new Way North album, and for having me on the show.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players and minds in Toronto, New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the globe, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Michael for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. And finally, for everything Joe Domino related, go to joedomino.com. And if you feel like it, you can donate to the Neon Jazz cause there. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.